Commander Jake Morrison stood at the big window of his ship, looking out at the empty space where the Galactic Council station should have been. His hands were shaking a little as he held the radio device. For 3 months, Earth had been sending messages to every alien friend they knew. The messages all said the same thing: "Help us, we are dying, please come." But no one came. No one even answered. Jake turned to look at his crew on the bridge of the UES Defiance. These were good people. The best Earth had to offer. Lieutenant A. Amy Foster sat at her control desk, her fingers moving fast over the buttons as she searched for any sign of life. Dr. Peter Hayes stood near the science station, his face white with worry. Behind them all, the big screen showed nothing but broken metal pieces floating in space. 3 months ago, everything had been normal. Jake remembered the day when Admiral Linda Carter called him to her office on Earth. She had looked tired, more tired than he had ever seen her. "Jake," she had said, "we have a problem, a big problem." The problem had a name: the Void Swarm. It was like nothing humans had ever seen before, ships made of dark metal that moved like insects. They came to star systems and ate everything, not just the people or the planets, but the stars themselves. They left nothing behind but empty space. The first attack had been on Kepler Station, humanity's pride and joy. It was their first real home among the stars. Built in a system 12 light years from Earth, 2 million people lived there: families, children, scientists, workers. One day they were sending happy messages home. The next day there was only silence. Then the outer colonies started going dark. New Tokyo, Freedom Point, Haven. One by one the lights went out. The last message from Haven had been short and scared. "They're here. God help us, they're everywhere." That's when Admiral Carter made the decision to ask for help. Earth had been trading with alien races for almost 100 years now. The Zephyrians with their beautiful blue skin and wise eyes. The Altarians, who looked like tall, thin humans but could live for 1,000 years. There were dozens of other races, all part of something called the Galactic Council. Humans had always been the new kids, the youngest race. The others were kind, but they treated humans like children who didn't understand the big wide galaxy yet. But they were friends. At least, Jake had always thought they were friends. "Commander," Amy called out, her voice tight with fear. "I'm picking up something from the debris field." Jake walked over to her station. "What kind of something?" "It looks like a data pod, one of the emergency ones the Council uses." Amy's fingers danced over her controls. "It's damaged, but I think I can get something from it." "Do it," Jake said. The main screen flickered to life. At first there was just static and broken sounds. Then a face appeared. It was an Altarian, but not like any Jake had ever seen. This one looked scared. Its usually calm golden eyes were wide with terror. "This is Council Member Theron of Altair, Prime," the face said. The voice was shaking. "If anyone receives this message, do not come to the Council Station. Do not come to any of our worlds. The swarm has found us. After all these years, they have finally found us." The image got worse, breaking up into squares of light and dark. "We thought we were safe," Theron continued. "We thought the deep space would protect us. But they never stopped hunting. They never stop. They have been doing this for thousands of years, maybe millions. World after world, race after race. They consume everything and move on." The image cleared for a moment. Behind Theron, Jake could see other aliens running back and forth. Some were screaming. Emergency lights were flashing red. "To the humans who may hear this," Theron said, looking right at the camera, "we are sorry, we should have told you the truth. The galaxy is not a safe place. It never was. There are no friends out here, only those who have not yet been found. By the hunters." A loud noise came from the recording, like metal being torn apart. "They adapt," Theron said quickly. "Every weapon we use, they learn from. Every trick we try, they remember. The only reason some races have lived this long is because we hid. We stayed quiet. We hoped they would pass us by." Another terrible sound. Theron looked over his shoulder, then back at the camera. But you humans, you are different. You make noise. You explore. You spread out like you own the galaxy. The swarm was always going to find you, and when they found you, they found all of us. The screen went dark for a moment. Then Theron's face came back. Perhaps that is for the best, he said. And now his voice was sad instead of scared. We have lived in fear for so long. Maybe it is time to stop running. The image started breaking up again. Good luck, young humans. You will need it. The swarm comes for everyone, and no one has ever stopped them. Not in all the long years since they first appeared. The recording ended. The bridge of the Defiance was very quiet. Dr. Hayes was the first to speak. How long do we have? Jake looked at the sensor readings Amy had put on the screen. Numbers that told a simple story. The Void Swarm was 6 months away from Earth. Long enough to get home, Jake said. Long enough to warn everyone. Amy turned in her chair. Commander, what do we tell them? That everyone we thought were our friends is dead? That we're next? Jake looked out the window again at the empty space where a great station full of life had once been. Somewhere out there, the Void Swarm was coming. The same force that had killed civilizations older than human. History, the same enemy that had never been stopped. We tell them the truth, he said. We tell them that when Earth called for friends, no friends came. Only death is coming for us now. He turned to his crew. Set course for Earth. Best speed. As the Defiance turned toward home, Jake thought about Theron's last words. The Altarian had sounded like he was giving up, like his whole race was ready to die. But Jake was human, and humans, he thought, had never been very good at giving up. President Helen Rodriguez stood in front of the biggest crowd she had ever seen. Every seat in the global assembly was full. Every screen on Earth, on the Moon, on Mars, and in the asteroid belt was showing her face. She had to tell 12 billion people that they were going to die. The words felt heavy in her mouth as she spoke. My fellow humans, I will not lie to you. The galaxy is empty. Our friends are dead. An enemy older than our entire species is coming to kill us all. She had expected panic, riots in the streets, people running and screaming. Instead, something strange happened. The crowd got very quiet. Not the scared quiet of people too frightened to move. The focused quiet of people who were listening very carefully. We have 6 months, she continued. 6 months to prepare for something that has never been stopped. Something that has killed every advanced race in the galaxy. When she finished speaking, something even stranger happened. Instead of chaos, there was order. Instead of fear, there was anger. Cold, hard anger that Helen had never seen before in her people. General Marcus Stone saw it first. He was in charge of all human military forces, and he had been expecting his soldiers to break down when they heard the news. Instead, they started working harder. They stopped complaining about long hours and hard training. They stopped asking for leave to visit their families. It's like they found something they were looking for, he told Dr. Susan Clark 3 weeks after the president's speech. Like they were waiting for this their whole lives. Dr. Clark was a military historian. She spent her days studying how humans fought wars, and she had been thinking about the same thing. Maybe they were, she said. She had been working day and night since the announcement, going through old records and books. Human history was full of war, more war than any other species they had ever met. The Zephyrians had achieved peace on their world after only a few hundred years of fighting. The Altarians had never fought a war at all. But humans had been fighting for their entire history. Big wars, small wars. Wars over land and water and ideas. They had gotten very good at it. Look at this, Dr. Clark said, showing Marcus a report on her computer. Every other species we know about evolved on stable worlds, safe worlds. Their biggest problems were weather and wild animals. Marcus looked at the information. Pictures of beautiful alien worlds with calm weather and plenty of food. But Earth tried to kill us every day, Susan continued. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years. Volcanoes that blocked out the sun. Rocks from space that hit like bombs. Diseases that killed half the world. And we survived all of it. She pulled up another screen. This one showed human history, wars and battles going back thousands of years. And when we weren't fighting the planet, we were fighting each other. We got so good at killing other humans that we had to invent new ways to do it. Better weapons, smarter tactics, faster ships. Marcus was starting to understand. The other species never had to learn how to fight something as smart as they were. Exactly, Susan said. They fought animals and natural disasters. We fought ourselves, and humans are the smartest, meanest, most stubborn things we ever met. The proof came 2 weeks later. Captain Ryan Bell was leading a patrol ship near Jupiter when they ran into the first Void Swarm scouts. 3 small ships, but each one was the size of a city block. They were covered in dark metal that seemed to eat light itself. Every military manual said the same thing when faced with a superior enemy. Retreat, call for help, and wait for backup. Ryan did something else entirely. He pointed his ship right at the biggest enemy vessel and pushed the engines to maximum power. His crew thought he had gone crazy. "Captain," his second-in-command shouted over the alarm sounds, "we're going to hit them." "That's the idea," Ryan said calmly. At the last second, just before impact, Ryan activated the emergency teleporter. It was only meant to be used to escape a dying ship. Instead, he used it to teleport his entire crew to a rescue ship that was waiting nearby. The UES Ranger hit the Void Swarm ship at nearly the speed of light. The explosion could be seen from Mars. When the light faded, all 3 enemy ships were gone, destroyed by an attack they had never seen before in millions of years of conquest. The news spread through human space like fire. Someone had hurt the Void Swarm. Someone had shown that they could be killed. More importantly, it had been done using human thinking. No other species would have thought to ram an enemy ship. It was too dangerous, too crazy, too desperate. But it worked. Captain Maria Santos read the report while sitting in her own ship near Saturn. She was leading a group of fighters that were supposed to guard the mining stations there. After reading about Ryan's victory, she started thinking, "What else could we do that they wouldn't expect?" she asked her crew. Her weapons officer, Lieutenant Tony Wilson, grinned. "Well, Captain, humans have always been really good at thinking of new ways to break things." Maria started planning. The Void Swarm was smart. They learned from every battle. They adapted to every weapon. But they had never fought humans before. They had never fought a species that had spent thousands of years learning how to kill things just as smart as themselves. Meanwhile, on Earth, factories that had been making cars and computers were now making weapons. But not the kind of weapons other species would expect. Humans were building things that only made sense to other humans. Dr. Kevin Ross was working on one such project. He was taking apart pieces of destroyed Void Swarm ships that Ryan Bell had brought back. What he found was amazing and terrifying. "They're like computers," he told Admiral Linda Carter, "but computers that can think and learn. Every time they fight someone, they remember what happened. They store the information and use it next time. So they learn from their mistakes," Linda said. "Yes, but only mistakes they understand," Kevin replied. "They expect logical attacks, planned attacks, military strategies that make sense." Linda smiled for the first time in months. And humans don't always make sense. By the time the main Void Swarm force reached the outer edge of the solar system, humanity was ready. Not with bigger ships or better weapons, but with something the enemy had never faced before. Human tactics, human thinking, human stubbornness mixed with human creativity. The aliens had been right about one thing. There were no friends in the galaxy. But they had been wrong about something else. They thought the Void Swarm couldn't be stopped because no one had ever tried hard enough. They had never met humans. Colonel Lisa Murphy watched through her office window as thousands of workers rushed around the Titan shipyards. The biggest military factory in human space was supposed to be shut down and moved to safety. Instead, Lisa had other plans. The main Void Swarm fleet had entered the solar system 3 days ago. Their ships were so big that they blocked out stars. There were thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands. Each one could destroy a planet by itself. "Colonel," her assistant said, running into the office. "Admiral Garcia is on the radio. He wants to know why we haven't started moving the factories yet." Lisa picked up the radio. "Admiral, this is Murphy. We're not moving. There was a long pause. "Colonel, you have direct orders to evacuate Titan. The enemy will be there in 2 days." "Yes, sir, they will," Lisa said. "And we'll be waiting for them." What Lisa was planning would have seemed crazy to any other species in the galaxy. Instead of running away from the enemy, she was going to let them come close. Very close. The Titan shipyards were designed to build warships, huge machines that could cut metal, shape armor, and put together the most complex parts. But Lisa wasn't using them to build ships anymore. She was building something else. "How many mining drones do we have ready?" she asked her chief engineer, Captain Bob Taylor. Bob looked at his notes. "About 50,000, Colonel. Each one has enough explosive power to blow up a city block." The mining drones were supposed to dig up metal and ice from asteroids. They were small, fast, and very good at attaching themselves to things. Lisa had made some changes to them. Now, instead of mining equipment, they carried bombs. 50,000 suicide drones, Lisa said to herself. "I wonder if the Void Swarm has seen anything like that before." She doubted it. Most species tried to save their equipment. They built expensive weapons and tried to use them over and over again. But humans had learned something during their long history of war. Sometimes you had to break your own things to win. 2 days later, the Void Swarm arrived at Titan. Their ships moved in perfect formation like they always did. They had fought this same battle 1,000,000 times before against 1,000 different species. They knew exactly what to expect. First, the defenders would try to fight with big guns and missiles. The swarm would adapt to those weapons. Then the defenders would try to run away. The swarm would catch them. Finally, the defenders would surrender or die. The swarm would take everything and move on, but the humans at Titan did something different. They let the enemy get close. Very close. Close enough to touch. "Now," Lisa said into her radio. 50,000 small drones shot out from hiding places all around the shipyards. They moved fast and in all directions, like angry bees from a broken hive. The Void Swarm ships tried to shoot them down, but there were too many of them. Each drone had been programmed with one simple job: find an enemy ship, attach to it, and explode. They didn't try to aim for important parts or look for weak spots. They just stuck to whatever they could reach and blew up. The Void Swarm had never seen anything like it. Their computers tried to understand what was happening, but it didn't make sense. Why would anyone waste so many machines just to do a little damage? But 50,000 explosions, even small ones, add up to a lot of damage. Void Swarm ships started breaking apart. Their perfect formation fell apart as damaged ships tried to get away from the explosions. "Phase 2, Lisa said. Hidden among the shipyard equipment were human soldiers with jetpacks and handheld weapons. They shot out from their hiding places like bullets, heading straight for the damaged enemy ships. Their job was even simpler than the drones: get inside an enemy ship and break everything they could find." Major Sarah Kim led one of these attack groups. She and her team landed on a Void Swarm ship that was spinning out of control from drone damage. They used cutting tools to break through the hull and get inside. The inside of the enemy ship was like a giant computer. Everything was clean and organized and logical. Sarah's team was the opposite. They ran through the ship breaking things at random. They didn't try to understand what anything did. They just broke it. "This is for Kepler Station," Sarah said as she smashed what looked like an important control panel. The Void Swarm tried to fight back, but they didn't understand what they were fighting. Their programming told them that enemies would try to capture their ships or steal their technology. But the humans weren't trying to capture anything. They were just trying to break everything they could reach before they died. Some of Sarah's team didn't make it out, but they had done enough damage. The enemy ship exploded just as the last few humans escaped. All around Titan, the same scene played out dozens of times. Human soldiers getting into enemy ships and breaking them from the inside. It was messy and wasteful, and cost many human lives. But it worked. Meanwhile on Earth, Admiral Tony Garcia was watching reports from all over the solar system. The humans weren't just fighting at Titan. They were fighting everywhere, and they were using the same kinds of crazy tactics. Near Mars, Captain Danny White had convinced the Void Swarm that his small fleet was trying to escape. The enemy followed them right into an asteroid field that humans had filled with hidden explosives. When the trap was sprung, it looked like the asteroids themselves were attacking the Void Swarm. Near Venus, Commander Lisa Brown was doing something even stranger. She was broadcasting fake radio messages that made it sound like Earth was empty and defenseless. When the Void Swarm ships moved to attack the planet, they found that every moon and space station was actually a weapon in disguise. Dr. Kevin Ross, still studying captured enemy technology, made an important discovery. "Admiral," he told Garcia over the radio, "I think I know why our tactics are working so well." "Tell me," Garcia said. "The Void Swarm learns from every battle. Their computers store information about every weapon, every tactic, every strategy they've ever seen. But they can only learn from things they understand." Garcia was listening carefully. "Human tactics don't make sense to them," Kevin continued. "We do things that waste resources and risk lives for very small advantages. From their point of view, we're fighting wrong." "And that's why we're winning," Garcia said. "Exactly. They can't adapt to tactics that don't follow any logical pattern." As the first major battle of the war ended, humans had done something no other species had ever managed. They had hurt the Void Swarm badly, not with better technology or superior numbers, but with ideas that came from thousands of years of humans fighting other humans. The enemy was learning that there was a difference between being smart and being human. General Adam Cooper stood in the command center on Earth, looking at a map of the solar system covered in green and red lights. 6 weeks ago, the red lights had been everywhere, showing Void Swarm ships destroying everything they touched. Now, there were more green lights than red ones. Human ships were winning. "How is this possible?" he asked Dr. Gary Thompson, who had become his most important advisor. Gary used to work with children, helping them with their problems. Now he was helping the military understand how to fight an enemy that thought like a giant computer. "It's simple," Gary said, pointing at the map. "The Void Swarm is trying to fight a logical war against people who don't think logically." Adam laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. "You're saying we're winning because we're crazy?" "Not crazy," Gary replied. "Human. There's a difference." The proof was happening right now near Jupiter. Captain Nicole Wright was in command of 30 human ships, facing 60 Void Swarm vessels. By every rule of space combat, she should retreat or surrender. Instead, she was doing something that made no sense at all. "All ships," Nicole said into her radio, "prepare to ram the nearest friendly vessel." Her officers looked at her like she had lost her mind. Lieutenant Mike Stevens, her second-in-command, spoke up. "Captain, did you say ram our own ships?" "You heard me correctly," Nicole replied. "On my command, every ship will crash into the ship next to it. Make it look good. Make it look like our engines failed and we lost control." The Void Swarm was watching from a distance, just like Nicole hoped they would. Their computers were trying to understand what was happening. First, the human ships had moved into attack formation. Then they had suddenly started crashing into each other. It looked like a terrible accident. "Execute," Nicole ordered. 30 human ships crashed into each other in a spectacular display of explosions and flying metal. It looked like the entire human fleet had been destroyed by their own mistakes. The Void Swarm ships moved closer to investigate, just like Nicole knew they would. But the explosions had been carefully planned. Hidden inside the wreckage were small human ships that had been disguised to look like debris. When the Void Swarm got close enough, these hidden ships came to life and attacked from inside the enemy formation. The Void Swarm had never seen anything like it. Their programming told them that no species would destroy their own ships just to create a trap. It was too wasteful, too risky, too stupid. But it worked. "We got 12 of them," Nicole reported to General Cooper later. "Lost 6 ships, but we got 12 of theirs." Adam shook his head in amazement. 12 enemy ships for 6 of ours. In any normal war, that would be considered a great victory. "This isn't a normal war," Gary reminded him, "and we're not normal people." Gary had been working on something he called the Chaos Protocol. It was based on a simple idea: Instead of trying to beat the Void Swarm's computers, humans should try to confuse them. Every time we fight them, Gary explained to a room full of military officers, they learn something new. They store that information and use it in the next battle. But what if we taught them the wrong things? Commander Beth Johnson, who was in charge of training new pilots, understood immediately. You want us to lose battles on purpose? Small battles, Gary said. Battles that don't matter. We let them win, but we make sure they learn the wrong lessons. It was a strategy that only humans could have invented. Other species tried to win every fight. Humans were willing to lose some fights in order to win the war. The plan worked better than anyone had hoped. In small battles all over the solar system, human ships would attack the Void Swarm using simple, predictable tactics. The enemy would adapt to these tactics and prepare for humans to use them again. But in the big battles, humans would do something completely different. The Void Swarm computers would be ready for the wrong attack, leaving them vulnerable to what humans actually did. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Miller got the most important job in the war. Intelligence reports had found the location of the Void Swarm's central command ship. It was hidden inside a converted asteroid near Saturn, protected by hundreds of smaller ships. We need someone to get inside that command ship and shut it down, General Cooper told Frank. But it's impossible to get close. Their defenses are too strong. Frank smiled. General, you just gave me an idea. What Frank was planning was so crazy that it took him 3 days to convince his superiors to let him try it. He was going to disguise his team as Void Swarm units and walk right into the enemy base. The plan required stealing enemy ships and learning how to fly them. It required making fake enemy uniforms and learning how to walk like the mechanical beings. Most importantly, it required convincing the Void Swarm computers that they were seeing their own forces instead of human attackers. The good news, Frank told his team, is that their computers are very logical. They don't expect to be lied to. What's the bad news? Asked Sergeant Tom Price. If they figure out who we really are, we'll be dead before we can blink. Frank's team spent 2 weeks preparing. They practiced walking like machines. They learned to speak in the short, clipped sentences that Void Swarm units used to communicate. They studied every detail of enemy behavior until they could copy it perfectly. When they were ready, Frank led his 20-person team toward the hidden command base. They flew and captured enemy ships and sent the correct identification codes. To the Void Swarm sensors, they looked like a routine patrol returning from battle. Command base, this is Patrol Unit 779, Frank said into the radio, trying to sound like a machine, requesting permission to dock for repairs. Permission granted, came the reply. Proceed to docking bay 12. Frank's heart was beating so fast he was sure the enemy would hear it, but they were inside. They had walked right through the most secure base the Void Swarm had ever built. Once inside, Frank's team split up. Half of them went to the power generators. The other half went to the central computer core. They moved quickly and quietly, still pretending to be enemy units doing routine maintenance. The Void Swarm base was huge, miles of corridors filled with mechanical beings going about their tasks. None of them paid any attention to Frank's team. After all, why would they? The computers had already identified them as friendly forces. When Frank reached the central computer core, he couldn't believe how easy it had been. The most important target in the Void Swarm fleet, and it was protected by nothing more than a simple door lock. All teams, he whispered into his radio. Are you in position? Power team ready, came one reply. Computer team ready, came another. Frank looked at his watch. If this worked, the war would be over in the next 5 minutes. If it didn't work, his team would be dead, but at least they would have tried. Execute, he said. 20 humans, pretending to be machines, began destroying the brain of the enemy that had conquered 1,000,000 worlds. And for the first time in its long existence, the Void Swarm never saw it coming. The explosion could be seen from Earth, a bright flash near Saturn that lasted for almost an hour. When it faded, the Void Swarm fleet just stopped moving. Thousands of ships that had been destroying everything in their path suddenly went quiet and dark. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Miller and his team had done it. They had destroyed the central command system that controlled the entire enemy fleet. but they had died doing it. The explosion that saved humanity had taken them with it. President Helen Rodriguez stood in the same assembly hall where she had announced the coming war 6 months earlier. This time, she had very different news to share. "My fellow humans," she said, "the war is over. We have won." The cheering lasted for 3 hours. People in the streets, on space stations, in mining colonies throughout the solar system, all celebrated together. Humanity had faced the end of everything and somehow survived. But Admiral Linda Carter knew that winning the war was only the beginning of their problems. She stood in her office on Earth, looking at reports from all over the galaxy. The news was not good. General Adam Cooper came in with the latest survey data. "Admiral, we've checked 47 star systems that used to have alien civilizations. They're all dead, every single one." Linda had expected this, but it still hurt to hear. It confirmed. "How many species?" "At least 200 that we know about, maybe more." The Void Swarm was very thorough. Dr. Peter Hayes had been working with teams all over human space, studying what was left of the galaxy. What he found was worse than anyone had imagined. The Void Swarm hadn't just killed the alien races. They had destroyed their planets, their histories, their cultures. Everything that made them who they were was gone. "It's like they never existed," he told Admiral Carter. "Billions of years of evolution, millions of years of civilization, all erased." But then Dr. Hayes found something that changed everything. Hidden in the ruins of the old Council Station, protected by quantum locks that even the Void Swarm couldn't break, was a vault. Inside that vault was the most precious thing in the galaxy: hope. "Admiral," he said excitedly, calling her on the radio from the ruins, "you need to see this. I found genetic samples, DNA patterns, cultural databases, everything we need to bring them back." Linda didn't understand at first. "Bring who back?" "All of them. Every species the Void Swarm destroyed." The Council kept backup copies of everything. Their biology, their history, their art, their music. It's all here. The discovery changed everything. Humanity wasn't just the survivors of a galactic war. They were the inheritors of an entire galaxy's worth of knowledge and life. President Rodriguez called another assembly. This time, she wasn't talking about war or survival. She was talking about the future. "We have a choice," she told the world. "We can take this empty galaxy and fill it with human colonies. We can build a human empire that spans the stars. Or we can do something that no species has ever done before." She paused, looking out at the millions of people watching her speak. "We can bring back the dead." The project was bigger than anything humans had ever attempted. They called it the Resurrection Protocol. Using the genetic templates from the Council, human scientists would rebuild the extinct species. Using the cultural databases, human teachers would help them remember who they used to be. It would take hundreds of years, maybe thousands, but humans had time. They had survived when everyone else had died. Now they could use that survival to give life back to those who had lost it. Commander Jake Morrison, now promoted to admiral, stood on the bridge of a new ship called the UES Phoenix. It was the first of many ships designed not for war, but for the opposite of war. The Phoenix was a ship built to create life. In the ship's huge biological laboratories, the first generation of new Altarians was growing. Tiny beings that looked exactly like their ancient ancestors, but who would grow up in a galaxy protected by humans. "It's strange," Jake said to Dr. Susan Clark, who had come with him on this first mission. 6 months ago, we were looking for friends among the stars. Now we're making our own friends." Susan smiled. "Maybe that's what humans were always meant to do. We're not good at finding friends, but we're very good at making them." The Phoenix's destination was Altair Prime, the former homeworld of the Altarian people. The Void Swarm had stripped it bare, leaving nothing but dead rock. But human terraforming technology could fix that. In 50 years, it would be a green world again. In 100 years, Altarian children would play in forests that humans had planted. As the Phoenix traveled through space, its long-range sensors picked up something impossible. A signal from beyond the galaxy. It was faint and far away, but it was definitely artificial. Someone else was out there. New enemies? Asked Dr. Clark. Jake looked at the signal data on his screen. It could be another threat like the Void Swarm. It could be survivors from some other galaxy who had fled their own disasters. It could be anything. Maybe, he said. But it doesn't matter. Susan looked at him with surprise. Doesn't matter? If there's another threat out there, then we'll deal with it, Jake said calmly. We're humans. We've gotten very good at dealing with threats. He was right. 6 months ago, humanity had been a young species begging for help from older, wiser civilizations. Now they were the oldest surviving civilization in the galaxy. They had learned the hardest lesson the universe could teach. There were no friends among the stars, only survivors. But they had also learned something else. Something that made them different from every other species that had ever lived. When the universe took everything away from them, they didn't just survive. They found a way to give it all back. The signal from beyond the galaxy grew stronger as the Phoenix continued its journey. Whatever was out there, it was coming closer. In a few years, maybe a few decades, humanity would face it. Jake wasn't worried. Humans had spent thousands of years learning how to fight enemies that were just as smart and just as determined as they were. They had beaten the Void Swarm using tactics that no other species could have imagined. If something new was coming, humanity would be ready. More importantly, they wouldn't be alone. In 100 years, the galaxy would be full of life again. Altarians and Zephyrians and dozens of other species, all alive because humans had refused to let them stay dead. Admiral, his communications officer called out, "We're receiving a transmission from Earth. President Rodriguez wants to speak with you." Jake took the call. The president's face appeared on his screen, smiling wider than he had seen her smile since before the war. "Admiral Morrison," she said, "I thought you should know. The first Zephyrian baby was born this morning. She's healthy and beautiful, and she'll grow up in a galaxy where humans make sure nothing like the Void Swarm ever happens again." Jake smiled back. "Thank you, Madam President. That's the best news I've heard all year." As the call ended, Jake looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of the galaxy, something unknown was coming. But humans would be ready. They always were. After all, they were the ruthless survivors of 1,000 wars. And now they had something worth fighting for again.